It's kind of funny. Usually when we talk about building something monumental, right? Like a skyscraper or a monument.
Right, something physical.
Exactly. There's this deep expectation of physical, tangible weight. It's a very engineering mindset.
Yeah, a manipulation of mass.
Right. Like if you want to build a cathedral, you literally have to quarry the stone, you have to cut the heavy timber, mix the mortar, and then eventually, the architect points to the blueprints and just says, there it is.
It's fundamentally a material endeavor. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's dealing with gravity and physical resistance.
Yeah, heavy, unyielding stone. It's clean, it's predictable, and honestly, it just makes sense to our primate brains. We like to see the blocks stacked up.
We really do.
Yeah.
And there's a deep comfort in that, I think. We like our grand structures to be visible, to cast a literal shadow across a plaza. We want it to be easily categorized as, well, architecture.
Right, because when you can touch the cold stone, you know the foundation is real. You're not just imagining it.
Exactly. But then, and this is where today's deep dives gets wild, you step into the world of theoretical physics.
Oh, boy.
And theories of consciousness and human ethics. And suddenly, those stone blocks completely vanish. They're just gone.
Poof, which is terrifying. Because we are looking at a construction landscape today that is infinitely more complex than a standard blueprint.
Right.
We are trying to build out of concepts and mathematics and the sheer subjective experience of being alive.
It is the absolute definition of building in the profound unknown. You are literally swapping limestone for causality and timber for the integrated states of human awareness.
And that is the exact landscape we are navigating today. So, to you, our inherently curious listener, welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. You handed us an incredible stack of essays today from a project called The Cathedral.
Written by Wout Neutkens.
Yes, Wout Neutkens. And you essentially asked us to figure out a massive question. Can we logically construct a secular blueprint for heaven?
Right, and we should probably clarify immediately, when we say heaven in this context, we're entirely stripping away all the theological baggage.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
We are not talking about a supernatural realm up in the clouds.
Right. No afterlife.
No harps, no pearly gates, no divine judgment, none of that.
No. We're talking about an earthly structure of robust, enduring human happiness. Something built strictly from the ground up, using the laws of physics, theories of consciousness, and rigorous ethics.
It's the idea of human flourishing, engineered as carefully and deliberately as an actual Gothic cathedral.
It is a massive, incredibly ambitious undertaking.
It really is. And to get there, we're going to be weaving through some seriously dense philosophical texts. I mean, the essays you sent over have titles like Finitism and the Origin, The Cathedral of Cause and Experience.
The battle for certainty is in there.
Yeah, and How Big is Big and The Whisper of the Ordinary.
They are dense.
Yeah.
But honestly, they are incredibly rewarding. I mean, they force a complete reevaluation of how we understand our place in the physical universe.
And along with these essays, you provided a series of seemingly disconnected images that we will definitely be referencing. We have a photograph of ancient sunlit ruins.
Beautiful shot.
A deep, starry night sky seen through tree branches. We've got this bizarre, abstract, corrugated cosmic shape floating in space. And then just quiet, intimate moments of ordinary nature.
Like the fluffy gray cat with bright green eyes.
Yes, that cat. Some pink tree blossoms catching the light. And a blackbird sitting in white flowers.
It might seem like a totally disparate collection of ideas and images, but there's a profound, unbreakable through line here. Our journey today is going to take us from the absolute microscopic boundaries of the universe's origin.
Like the literal beginning of time.
Exactly. From the literal beginning of reality all the way up to the intimate psychological reality of your own daily habits. We are scaling from the cosmos to the couch, basically.
From the cosmos to the couch. I love that. Because, I mean, to build a cathedral, even a conceptual one, you need a foundation. You can't just start with the beautiful stained glass windows of human happiness.
You have to dig into the dirt first.
You have to dig into the dirt. We have to start at the literal beginning of reality. To understand how to build this secular heaven, we first have to figure out what kind of universe we actually live in.
Right.
And Neutkens starts us off in the essay Finitism and the Origin with a massive philosophical headache.
A beautifully articulated headache, though, because it forces us to confront the logical trap of the universe's origin.
Right.
It's a paradox that has haunted philosophers from Aristotle to Kant, and honestly, it remains unresolved in modern cosmology. The core question is deceptively simple, really. Did reality have a beginning, or has it always existed?
It's one of those questions that seems like it should just have a straightforward answer, right? But the deeper you look, the more the floor just totally falls out from under you.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, let's assume that moments in the past, like yesterday or the day before, that actually happened. If we look at the totality of the history of reality, it must be either finite or infinite.
Those are the only two available options on the table. Either there was a day one of existence, or there wasn't.
Right. But here is where we hit the trap. If the history of reality is finite, that means there's a very first absolute moment.
A literal beginning.
Yes.
Yes.
But what preceded that first moment? By definition, nothing. It must have emerged from the void. But logically, that is impossible.
Because the void is literally nothing. It has no properties, no potential, no mass, and nothing cannot act as a cause to create something.
You can't build a house out of 0 bricks. The math just doesn't work. Something cannot spontaneously erupt from a state of absolute non-being, because non-being has no mechanism to erupt.
Exactly. So finite history seems to violate the most basic laws of logic and causality.
Which means we are forced to look at the alternative.
Right. Suppose the history of reality is infinite. That means the universe has always been here, stretching back forever.
Okay.
That means the series of moments leading up to right now, the present moment where you and I are having this exact conversation, is an infinite series.
But here is the second part of the trap, and this is the part that always gets me. That infinite series of moments has been completed.
Right, because we are here.
Because we have successfully arrived at the present. But mathematically and logically, you cannot complete an infinite series. It never ends, by definition.
What's fascinating here is how simple the analogy can be. If you imagine counting down from infinity, you would never, ever reach 0. No matter how fast you count or how much time you have, an infinite amount of time must pass before you reach the present.
Which means the present could never arrive.
Exactly. So we could never actually arrive at today. The fact that today is happening means the past cannot be an infinite sequence.
And there is the stunning conclusion Neutkens presents. An infinite past is illogical, and a finite past is illogical.
But reality must be either finite or infinite.
Because those exhaust all the logical options. Therefore, the origin of reality itself is fundamentally illogical. Pure logic alone simply cannot resolve the dilemma of why there is something rather than nothing.
And yet here we are.
Yeah, you and I are sitting here, you're listening to this. The universe undeniably exists. It's the ultimate gotcha to pure logic. The universe is basically looking at our math textbooks and just laughing.
It really is.
So what does the author conclude from this? I mean, if it is logically impossible for the universe to exist, but it clearly does, what exactly are we dealing with?
Neutkens refers to this as the magic of the origin. And he isn't using magic in the sense of, wizards or spells.
It's not Harry Potter.
No. He's using it as a placeholder for a state of affairs that fundamentally breaks the rules of rational causality as we understand them. The origin must be both logical and illogical simultaneously.
Wow.
But how we construct our understanding of physics depends heavily on whether we choose to view that magic through the lens of a finite or an infinite universe. And this is where the author makes a crucial foundational choice for his Cathedral project.
Right, because if you choose the infinite history model, you run into what he calls the problem of being ungrounded.
Yes, the ungroundedness.
If reality is infinite in all directions, there is always a smaller particle beneath the quarks. There is always a larger multiverse beyond our observable universe. The magic, that illogical nature of uncaused existence, is just smeared across all of existence forever.
You can never touch the bottom.
You can never find the floor. And when you pull that thread, you realize how destabilizing an ungrounded universe is for any kind of scientific or philosophical project.
Absolutely. Because in an infinite, ungrounded reality, there is no fundamental base layer. The laws of physics we observe might just be like local weather patterns in a much larger, infinitely strange system.
It's turtles all the way down. You can never find the floor to start building your cathedral.
Which is exactly why the author heavily leans into the finite choice. What's fascinating here is that in a finite reality, all of that illogical magic is heavily concentrated into a single point.
The origin itself.
Exactly. Out of the void comes not an infinitely complex eternal multiverse, but something incredibly minimal. A single indivisible point. A beginning.
Like a seed.
Yes. And because all the magic is locked away in that one singular initiating event, everything that comes after it can follow strict, rational, causal rules. Because there is nothing beneath or behind that fundamental grain of reality, the laws of the universe remain stable. They have a solid floor.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because this specific stance leads Neutkens to reject a very popular modern cosmological idea, right, known as the Ruliad.
Oh, the Ruliad, yeah.
Every time I read about the Ruliad, it just feels like modern physics is writing speculative sci-fi.
It really does.
From what I understand, the Ruliad is this idea of a completed infinite multiverse. It is the concept that every possible computational rule, every possible universe, every conceivable outcome is happening all at once.
Existing simultaneously in this massive, unthinkably huge mathematical object.
Right. It's a dizzying concept.
It's heavily discussed in theoretical physics and computational mathematics right now. It is the ultimate expression of the everything everywhere all at once philosophy. But Neutkens argues that if we want to build a reliable foundation, if we want to build a cathedral of human flourishing, the Ruliad is a terrible place to start.
But wait, why is that? I mean, if it contains everything, shouldn't it contain the blueprint for our heaven too?
That's the intuitive thought, sure. But if everything happens everywhere all at once, causality itself completely blurs into meaninglessness.
How so?
Well, think about it. If every possible outcome is realized somewhere in this vast structure, then nothing is uniquely explained. Why did the apple fall from the tree? In our universe, we say gravity. But in the Ruliad, there's a universe where it fell up, one where it turned into a bird, one where it just vanished.
Oh, I see.
It is a totality without a definitive process. It is completely static.
It makes me think of, like, trying to read a book where every single page has every possible word in the English language printed on top of each other.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right, because sure, technically it contains all the information in the world. It contains all of Shakespeare and every instruction manual ever written. But it's totally meaningless to us. You cannot read a story out of a solid block of black ink.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. You need the negative space, the things that aren't happening, for the things that are happening to have any meaning. So instead of the Ruliad, the Cathedral aligns with a model championed by the Wolfram Physics Project.
Ah, Stephen Wolfram's work. This is fascinating stuff.
It is. The Wolfram model suggests that the universe is not an infinite block of all possibilities, but rather a structure generated by a single, minimal, reliable rule.
Just one rule.
One rule. And this rule is applied over and over and over again to a discrete structure, mathematically described as a hypergraph.
Okay, we definitely need to pause and visualize a hypergraph, because that sounds like heavy jargon.
It does. Think of a hypergraph like a cosmic social network. Imagine a massive map showing who is friends with whom on a platform.
Okay, I can picture that. Nodes and lines connecting them.
Exactly. But instead of people, the nodes in this cosmic network are fundamental, indivisible atoms of space itself. They don't exist in space. Their connections actually create the fabric of space.
Whoa. So space isn't a container. The connections are the space.
Yes. So it is not everything happening at once. It is one tiny, simple rule defining how these nodes connect and disconnect, happening, and then happening again to the result of the first thing, and then happening again.
Iteration.
Iteration. It's an ongoing, dependable computation. And from this one simple rule, iterating endlessly at the foundational layer of reality, all the staggering complexity we see emerges. The dimensions of space, the flow of time, the reliable causality of the laws of physics. Time itself is not a pre-existing container that the universe sits inside. Time is literally defined as the process of this rule being applied.
Time is the construction process.
Time is the construction process.
Neutkens uses a great analogy in the text here. He says the pyramids weren't built by magic or forgotten advanced civilizations with levitation devices. They were built by simple physics, human cooperation, and an enormous amount of time. You stack one block, then another. Then another.
This rejection of completed infinities, rejecting the idea that the universe is already a finished block of all possibilities, is absolutely vital to the entire cathedral project. What's fascinating here is that it's not just pedantic math for the sake of arguing with cosmologists. It's about preserving cause and effect.
Right.
A universe driven by one reliable rule guarantees that things happen for a reason. It means our actions have actual consequences.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because I have to jump in here and play devil's advocate.
Oh, sorry.
because Neutkens himself admits a vulnerability in the essay The Battle for Certainty. He freely admits that he cannot logically prove the universe is finite, and we've already established the origin is illogical either way.
He does admit that, yes.
So aren't we just picking the math that gives us a warm, fuzzy feeling? I mean, how can we base an entire ethical and scientific blueprint for heaven on what is essentially just a philosophical preference for a neat and tidy universe?
That is the exact tension Neutkens addresses, and it's a vital critique. He acknowledges the immense temptation to say, my model is absolute reality. But he deliberately stops short of that dogma. He introduces this concept of probability verging on certainty.
Probability verging on certainty.
Yes, we cannot have absolute, godlike certainty about the foundational rule of the universe. We can't step outside the universe to check the source code. The search space for all possible hypergraph rules is simply too vast for us to ever prove we found the exact one.
So it's an educated guess. He compares it to DNA evidence in a courtroom or calculating the trajectory of an asteroid.
That's right. You can never be mathematically 100% certain the asteroid will hit exactly that square inch of the desert. But the converging lines of evidence make doubt totally unreasonable.
Okay, that makes sense.
The construction of this cathedral is a research project based on internal consistency and empirical observation. As long as we haven't found a single causal event in our universe that fundamentally breaks the rules. I mean, we have never observed magic. We have never seen something appear truly without a cause.
Right, apples don't just turn into birds.
Exactly. So this single rule model is the most fruitful, logical framework we have. It is an open attitude based on the profound unknown. We choose the single rule not just because it is comforting, but because it is the only model that actually allows us to build something dependable.
We are betting all our chips on causality because, so far, causality has never lost a single bet in the history of human observation. Every time we look deep enough, we find a cause.
We always find a cause.
Yeah.
And if we accept this premise, that the universe is a massive, ongoing process driven by a single rule starting from a finite point in the past, it begs the next massive question.
How did a simple rule generate the staggering, overwhelming complexity of the universe we see today?
Exactly. How do you get from a simple spatial network to a human brain?
Which means we need to talk about the math of the unimaginable.
Yes, we do.
Because if we are saying the universe started from a single finite rule, we have to understand the sheer scale, the explosive potential of what a simple mathematical rule can generate over time. And to do that, Neutkens takes us on a journey up something called the fast-growing hierarchy.
The fast-growing hierarchy, or FGH, it's a mathematical tool designed to index functions based on how incredibly fast they grow.
Yeah.
It is a way to name and categorize numbers so unimaginably large that they almost destroy our cognitive capacity to even think about them.
He grounds this nicely at the start, though. He notes that a billion seconds is about 31.7 years. A trillion seconds is 31,700 years, which takes us back past the last ice age.
Right, those sound like huge numbers to a human being.
To me, they're huge, but the FGH reduces a trillion to a microscopic rounding error almost immediately.
It does.
Let's walk through how this works conceptually for you listening, because the escalation is terrifying.
We don't need to get bogged down in reciting endless brackets, but let's look at the mechanism of growth. The hierarchy starts simply. You give it an input, say the number 3. The first level just adds 1 to it. The next level multiplies. The level after that introduces exponents.
Right, adding, then multiplying, then exponents. We learn that in middle school. It's fast, but it's manageable.
But the genius and the terror of the FGH is how it uses recursion. At the next level, it dictates that you take the function from the previous level and you apply it to itself a certain number of times. And the number of times you apply it is determined by the massively huge output you just generated.
Wait, okay, this is where my brain starts to melt. So you aren't just adding numbers. You are telling the math to take its own most extreme outcome and use that gargantuan number as the instruction for how many times to repeat the explosive process again.
Yes. It is exponential growth feeding on its own exponential exhaust.
Oh, wow.
By the time you reach just the third major index of this hierarchy, a function written simply as 3 of 3, the result is a number that, if you tried to write it out in standard digits, would have over 100 million digits.
100 million digits. And just to give you, the listener, a sense of scale here, cosmologists estimate the number of fundamental atoms in the entire observable universe is around 10 to the 80th power.
That's the one with 80 zeros after it.
Right. This number, F3 of 3, has 100 million zeros. It is unfathomably larger than the physical capacity of the universe to contain it. If every atom in the universe was a piece of paper, you literally couldn't write this number down, and we are only on step 3.
And the mathematicians who built this hierarchy didn't stop there. When mere recursion isn't fast enough, they introduced ordinal numbers, like omega. When you cross the threshold into these ordinals, the output of the insanely gigantic number you just calculated becomes the index of the next function. You're essentially shifting the gears of infinity.
As Neutkens writes, the mind stutters. You race through these omegas, climbing higher and higher up this ladder of abstraction, up to an ordinal called epsilon 0, where the mathematical notation itself begins to break down into endless recursive loops.
The output at this level is so astronomical that comparing it to the size of the observable universe is like comparing the universe to a single solitary electron.
But incredibly, the conceptual landscape goes even further. Neutkens introduces a function called the tree of trees, or tree 3.
Tree 3 is fascinating because it dwarfs the fast-growing hierarchy at those earlier stages, but it is derived from a game so simple a child could play it.
Wait, a game?
Yeah. You are essentially drawing networks of points and lines, which mathematicians call trees, using seeds of up to 3 different colors. The only rule of this game is that each new tree you draw cannot contain a structural copy of any tree you drew previously. You are forced to constantly invent new shapes.
Okay, sounds simple enough.
The question the math asks is, how many trees can you draw before you run out of unique shapes and are forced to draw a copy, ending the game?
So if you play with one color, the game ends immediately. The answer is 1 tree. If you play with 2 colors, you can manage to draw 3 trees before you get stuck.
Right.
But if you add just one more color, if you play with 3 colors, the answer is tree 3. And tree 3 is a number so incomprehensibly large, it requires special ordinals far above epsilon 0, just to point at it. It defies all physical metaphors.
Yeah, and this is the crucial part for our cathedral. It is entirely finite. It is an exactly defined finite number. The game will eventually end.
It's not infinite, it's just big.
Vastly big.
Yeah.
And this leads us to the ultimate function in this discussion, which connects this wild math back to the physics of our universe. The Busy Beaver function.
Busy Beaver, I love that name.
It's a great name. The Busy Beaver game involves Turing machines, which are essentially the most basic, stripped-down conceptual models of a computer. A Turing machine reads a tape, follows a simple set of rules, and changes its state. The Busy Beaver function asks a specific question. What is the absolute maximum number of steps a simple Turing machine with a certain number of rules can take before it finally halts and stops computing?
Meaning, what is the absolute maximum lifespan of a simple computer program that doesn't just get stuck at a dumb infinite loop, but actively creates new complex information and eventually comes to a stop?
Precisely. For very small machines, with maybe 4 or 5 rules, we can run them and calculate the exact Busy Beaver number. But as you add just a few more rules, the maximum possible lifespan explodes so violently that the Busy Beaver function becomes mathematically uncomputable.
Uncomputable.
Yes. To know which program runs the longest without falling into an infinite loop, you would have to wait for every possible program to stop. But some of these simple programs continually create such incredibly dense, new, complex information that you can never mathematically prove if they will ever fall silent.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Why are we subjecting our listener to all this mind-bending, headache-inducing math? What does drawing trees and counting the lifespan of theoretical computers have to do with building a secular heaven of human happiness?
Because it proves a fundamental, optimistic point about the architecture of our reality.
Okay.
If our universe is driven by a simple, reliable rule applied to a hypergraph, much like a simple Turing machine following a rule, it produces causality. And this journey up the FGH and the Busy Beaver function proves that causality generated by simple rules can produce complexity that constantly, endlessly increases without ever hitting a ceiling.
This is where one of the images you provided comes into play perfectly. You share this beautiful photograph of a starry night sky, viewed upward through the dark, silhouetted branches of a tree. It is deep blue, dotted with tiny points of light, looking out into the vastness.
It's a stunning image.
When I look at that image in the context of this staggering math, it's like we are looking out at a universe that is finite in its history. It has a solid trunk, a clear starting point, but it branches out into an infinite, completely unwritten future.
That is exactly what the math guarantees.
Mm-hmm.
The Busy Beaver function shows us that without the illogical trap of completed infinities, there is nothing outside our universe to limit it. There is nothing preventing the fundamental rule from making new reality indefinitely.
So it's basically like a machine that keeps inventing entirely new primary colors we've never seen before, guaranteeing we never, ever run out of paint to draw the future.
That is a brilliant way to put it. It guarantees that the future can perpetually generate new, well-defined reality. There is no ultimate plateau where the universe runs out of ideas or where evolution stops. The complexity will just keep stacking. From a structural standpoint, we will never be bored because the universe is fundamentally a novelty-generating engine.
Okay, so we have established a massive, endlessly complex physical universe that is constantly generating new causal structures. The foundation is solid, but we have a major problem if we are trying to build heaven here.
What's that?
Physics, on its own, doesn't feel like anything.
Ah, yes. It is entirely objective.
Right. A hypergraph calculating a trillion iterations of spatial nodes doesn't feel warm, it doesn't feel happy, it doesn't appreciate a good cup of coffee. How does this sprawling, cold mathematical structure turn into the subjective feeling of a sunbeam on your face or the grief of losing a loved one?
This is the hard problem of consciousness, and it requires a bridge between the physical and the subjective. Neutkens builds this bridge using integrated information theory, or IIT, pioneered by the neuroscientist Giulio Tononi. Because, as you noted, a cathedral of human flourishing is not made of physics alone, it is made of experience.
So IIT begins with a very intuitive, almost philosophical observation about what it is actually like to be conscious, right?
Yes. Every experience you have is a unitary, specific whole.
Like, if you look at a red rose, you cannot separate the redness of the rose from its shape in your mind. You don't experience a gray shape over here and a formless blob of red over there. You experience a unified, irreducible red rose.
Exactly. And Tony argues that to create that unified subjective experience, the physical system generating it, in our case, the human brain, must mirror that unity. It must consist of parts that are highly differentiated, meaning they can hold a vast amount of information, but they must also be deeply, inextricably interdependent.
They have to talk to each other.
They do. IIT quantifies this interdependence with a mathematical measure called phi, represented by the Greek letter phi.
Okay, so phi is basically the measure of how much a system's whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? It measures the irreducible causal structure.
Let's use an analogy to make this really clear. Think of a massive crowd of 100,000 people in a stadium, all shouting at random.
Sounds chaotic.
It is loud, it is complex, but it is not integrated. If you magically cut the stadium in half and put a soundproof wall down the middle, the two halves continue to function exactly as before, just two crowds of 50,000 people shouting. The causal power of the whole isn't destroyed by splitting it. Therefore, the crowd has a phi of 0.
But if you compare that to a symphony orchestra.
Exactly. A symphony orchestra playing Beethoven is highly integrated. The violins are reacting to the cellos, the conductor is pacing the brass. If you drop a soundproof wall down the middle of the orchestra, you don't have two smaller symphonies. You have ruined the music entirely. The causal power of the system existed only in its integrated whole. The orchestra has high phi.
And IIT makes a profound, radical claim based on this mathematics. Consciousness is not some magical vapor secreted by the brain. Consciousness is identical to a local, maximally integrated causal structure.
This is the bridge. The Wolfram model gives us a universe made of a vast causal hypergraph. And IIT tells us that when a pocket of that causal hypergraph folds in on itself and becomes incredibly densely entangled and integrated, when it becomes a symphony rather than a shouting crowd, it doesn't just process information in the dark, it experiences it. The mathematics of the universe ignite into feeling.
Let's look at the images you provided to make this really concrete. You shared this picture of an abstract 3D corrugated structure floating against a backdrop of deep space and the Milky Way. It looks like folded, undulating layers of bone or stone, totally alien and mathematical.
We could view that image as a visual representation of the raw mathematical causal hypergraph. It is vastly complex, it has structure, but it is raw, unintegrated physics.
Now contrast that with the other three images you provided from nature. The blackbird perched in the white blossoms against a bright blue sky, the vibrant pink tree blossoms catching the sunlight, and that gorgeous, fluffy gray cat with the piercing green eyes looking off to the side in a lush garden.
Those images feel entirely different, don't they?
They feel alive, fragile, and present.
According to IIT, the cat and the blackbird aren't just collections of atoms blindly executing a physics rule. They are local maxima of phi. The cat's brain is a galaxy of interdependence, Its subjective experience of sitting in that garden, feeling the breeze on its fur, smelling the damp earth, watching a leaf move, is a highly integrated, unified reality. The physical causal structure has folded in on itself so densely that it has burst into consciousness.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh.
Because if we follow the logic of IIT, if any physical system with a non-zero phi has some form of experience, aren't we just dipping straight into panpsychism?
The panpsychism critique.
Right. Like, does a thermostat have feelings? Is the global internet secretly suffering right now because it is a highly connected network?
It is a common critique of IIT, but Neutkens navigates it carefully. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to be very precise with the word experience.
Yeah.
At the absolute micro level, a simple system with a tiny, barely non-zero, like a few connected logic gates, doesn't have experience as we understand it. It doesn't have a sense of self or memories or a rich visual field or emotions. It just possesses the irreducible mathematical precondition for experience. It is the fundamental spark.
Like how a single electron has an electrical charge, but a single electron isn't a lightning bolt. You need trillions of them moving together to get the flash.
Precisely. Rich consciousness, what we recognize as a mind capable of suffering or joy, requires the immense astronomical interdependence found in biological neural networks. The internet might have a massive, complex structure, but its integration is relatively low compared to a mammalian brain because its parts are designed to be highly independent.
Oh, because if a node goes down, the internet survives.
Exactly. If a massive server farm goes down in Tokyo, a laptop in New York still functions perfectly. It's more like the shouting crowd than the symphony.
Okay, that makes sense. So biological evolution over billions of years was the process that accidentally built these hi-fi structures, these symphonies of flesh. But Neutkens points out a deeply tragic flaw in this evolutionary process. Evolution didn't build these hi-fi structures to be happy, it built them to survive.
And this brings us to the evolutionary origin of suffering. The first biological minds weren't contemplating poetry. They were crude instruments fighting a brutal environment. They needed to navigate a dangerous, physically demanding world, so they relied on incredibly powerful feedback loops: hunger, fear, pain.
Neutkens defines suffering in this framework very specifically, and it is a brilliant insight. He says suffering is the experience of a structure with hi-fi being threatened, destabilized, or torn apart. It is what happens when that beautiful, integrated whole is violently disrupted by the environment.
That disruption is the negative valence of experience. Higher phi deepens your capacity to experience. It makes the colors brighter, the joy more profound, but it also makes the pain infinitely sharper.
Double-edged sword.
Very much so. The degree of phi sets the depth and volume of the experience, but evolutionary conditioning sets the sign, whether it feels good or bad. We evolve to feel excruciating, blinding pain when our integrated structure is threatened, like touching a hot stove or being attacked by a predator because that negative valence kept our ancestors alive long enough to reproduce.
Which is a pretty bleak realization when you sit with it.
Oh.
We are walking highly tuned, hi-fi integration engines, originally programmed by millions of years of blind, unfeeling evolution to be terrified and hungry just so we wouldn't die out.
It's sobering.
And that perfectly transitions us into the psychological reality of the modern human. Because if our consciousness is capable of such profound integration, why do we spend so much of our daily lives feeling either quietly miserable or just totally numb to the world?
We have to move from the deep, abstract mechanics of the brain's hardware to the practical psychology of our daily software. And the dominant force dictating our everyday experience is a psychological phenomenon known as the hedonic treadmill.
The hedonic treadmill. This is this concept that human beings have an incredible, almost terrifying capacity to get used to absolutely anything.
We really do.
We have a baseline level of happiness, and no matter what happens to us, whether we win the lottery or suffer a terrible accident, we eventually habituate. The initial spike of joy or despair fades, and we drift back to our baseline.
Neutkens describes habituation as the immune system for the psyche. And from an evolutionary survival standpoint, it is absolutely necessary.
How so?
Well, if you are paralyzed by eternal, overwhelming ecstasy every time you find a piece of sweet fruit, you will starve when winter comes because you stop looking for more food. If you are paralyzed by eternal, debilitating terror after escaping a tiger, you won't be able to forage for food the next day. The mind acts as a ruthless thermostat, constantly returning us to an emotional equilibrium so we can keep functioning in the world.
But the author goes to a very dark, extreme historical example to show just how powerful and all-encompassing this psychological thermostat is. He talks about Viktor Frankl.
Yes, the brilliant Austrian psychiatrist who survives the Nazi concentration camps, specifically Auschwitz.
Frankl's observations in his book Man's Search for Meaning are essential here because they represent the absolute horrifying limit of human adaptation.
He noted that even in the unimaginable, systematic hell of the death camps, prisoners gradually developed a new baseline of normality. They adapted to the omnipresent stench, the arbitrary death, the starving cold.
Frankl famously wrote, "An abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior."
They developed a dark, necessary pragmatism. They figured out exactly how to ration a tiny, moldy crust of bread over 24 hours. They learned exactly how to stand to avoid a guard's gaze. They even developed a macabre gallows humor among themselves. And this proves that the human mind is not just a passive victim of its circumstances, it is an active creator of subjective reality.
Even in literal manufactured hell, humans will build a routine, complete with small relative joys, just to survive the day.
But Neutkens uses Frankl not just to praise the resilience of the human spirit. He uses this extreme example to highlight a massive danger for all of us. He asks this chilling question: if we can get used to hellish circumstances and even find moments of happiness within them, when does our incredible habituation become collaboration with our own misery?
When does our psychological flexibility turn into self-betrayal?
That is the deep shadow of human adaptation. The exact same mechanism that saves our minds from breaking can also quietly imprison us. Neutkens gives several powerful modern examples of how this plays out in everyday life. Think of someone caught in an emotionally abusive relationship. Initially, the insults or the controlling behavior are shocking. They are intolerable. But slowly, habituation creeps in like a thick fog.
They learn to read their partner's subtle moods. They adapt their own behavior to walk on eggshells and avoid the outbursts. They find intense, relieving happiness in the rare good moments, the apologies, the peaceful evenings.
And over time, they entirely normalize the abuse. The relative happiness they find in those quiet moments acts as a powerful anesthetic, blinding them to the fundamental injustice and toxicity of the reality they're living in. The capacity for adaptation literally becomes their jailer.
That's horrifying.
And we see this dynamic operating on massive societal levels too. Think of the modern corporate employee who normalizes a 60-hour work week, ignoring their creeping burnout, the loss of their hobbies, the strain on their marriage because they get a hit of dopamine from a boss's rare compliment or a small year-end bonus.
Or the citizen living in a creeping surveillance state. Neutkens explicitly mentions the salami tactic of losing freedom slice by tiny slice.
Exactly. At first, people are outraged by the installation of facial recognition cameras on every corner or algorithms aggressively tracking their private data. It feels invasive.
But after a few years, it just becomes the invisible background noise of modern life. They get used to it. They might even actively defend it, saying, well, it makes my commute faster, give me better shopping recommendations. I have nothing to hide.
They are trading essential, profound freedoms for the comfort of incremental convenience. The happiness they feel is the terrible contentment of a prisoner who has been allowed to paint the walls of their cell a nicer color. And this forces us to distinguish fundamentally between different types of happiness.
Right, he goes back to the ancient Greeks to clarify this. He draws a hard line between hedone and eudaimonia.
Hedone is fleeting, subjective pleasure. It is a biological hit of dopamine. You can experience hedone in almost any circumstance, no matter how degraded.
Like, you can profoundly enjoy the taste of a cigarette while knowing with absolute certainty it is actively giving you cancer.
Right. You can feel the safety and order of a totalitarian regime while your autonomy is systematically stripped away.
But eudaimonia is something much deeper. It is authentic human flourishing. It is living a genuinely good, meaningful life based on autonomy, deep connection, and the full realization of your potential.
The ultimate trap of habituation is that it tricks us into accepting hedon cheap pleasure when we are actually being denied eudaimonia. We settle for the anesthesia instead of demanding the cure.
And this brings us to another one of the evocative images you provided. The photograph of the massive, dark, brooding storm cloud, but its top edge is rimmed with this brilliant, glowing, iridescent rainbow light, a literal silver lining breaking through the gloom.
It is a stunning visual, but in the context of this cathedral project, It perfectly represents the terrifying paradox of habituation. We humans are incredibly evolutionarily good at finding the silver lining, at focusing on the glowing edge of happiness, even when our situation is terrible.
But if we focus only on the silver lining, we might blind ourselves entirely to the fact that we are living under a massive, oppressive, dark cloud that is slowly raining acid on us.
Precisely.
But I have to ask a practical question here because this sounds exhausting. If habituation is a built-in biological survival tool, isn't constantly fighting it and questioning it dangerous? If I critically analyze every single comfort in my life, my morning coffee routine, my comfortable couch, my stable but maybe slightly boring job, won't I just turn into a miserable, overthinking neurotic who can never enjoy anything?
That is a very valid fear, and Neutkens addresses it by introducing the concept of critical habituation.
Hmm.
The goal of this framework is not to be a miserable ascetic or to reject all comfort out of paranoia.
Thank goodness.
It is about adopting a conscious, reflective stance toward your own life. It is about periodically stepping back and asking yourself a very specific question. Would my past self, the person I was before I slowly adapted to this situation, accept my current reality?
Oh, I like that. It's about maintaining a psychological tether to your original values before the treadmill wore you down.
Yes. It takes immense courage to choose to be temporarily, acutely unhappy in the service of a greater, authentic eudaimonia. It means having the bravery to quit the job that offers numbing financial security at the cost of your soul. It means leaving the comfortable relationship that doesn't challenge you to grow.
And importantly, Neutkens says we cannot always do this critical work alone. We desperately need the external perspectives of friends and loved ones to spot the cages we have made cozy for ourselves.
Because outsiders haven't undergone the same slow habituation process we have.
They can see the iron bars on the windows that we've carefully painted over to look like wallpaper.
That's exactly it. So let's review where we are. We've diagnosed the core problems. Our evolutionary hardware traps us in a cycle of suffering to keep us alive, and our psychological software traps us in numbing habituation to keep us sane.
How do we break out of this cycle?
This is the climax of the deep dive. Constructing heaven. Safety, technology, and freedom. How do we take this reliable, rule-based universe full of potential complexity and use it to consciously build a robust structure of human flourishing?
The very first step is dismantling a very persistent, deeply ingrained cultural myth. The idea that we need suffering in order to appreciate happiness.
We hear this everywhere. It's in our literature, our movies, our folk wisdom. You can't appreciate the light without the dark. Without pain, joy is meaningless. You have to know hunger to appreciate a meal.
Neutkens argues forcefully that this is a fundamental category error. Suffering is not a required contrast agent for happiness.
No, it's not. If you have a profound, joyous conversation with a friend, that joy is not predicated on the fact that you were hit by a car the week before. The true enemy of enduring happiness isn't a lack of suffering. The enemy is boredom.
The challenge of building heaven is figuring out how to habituate to things that never bore us.
Exactly. He makes a crucial, very nuanced distinction here between repetition and familiarity. Repetition leads to boredom and numbness. Doing the exact same simple, unchallenging task 1,000 times hollows out your subjective experience.
But familiarity is something entirely different.
Let's use his analogy of music and expand on it. Think of a truly great, incredibly complex symphony, like a Mahler piece. The first time you hear it, it is beautiful, but it might be a bit overwhelming. You catch the main melody.
Yeah, you just get the broad strokes.
The 10th time you hear it, you stop focusing on the main melody and you start noticing the intricate interplay between the cellos and the woodwinds in the background. The 50th time, you feel the emotional resonance of a specific minor chord progression that you completely missed before.
You are habituating to the music, but the experience isn't emptying out. It is actively deepening. Your internal capacity for integration, your brain's fine, is actually growing and complexifying to match the structural complexity of the music you are absorbing.
And this brings us back to the math of the Busy Beaver function we talked about earlier.
Oh, wow, it all connects.
Because we live in a universe generated by a complexity-producing rule, depth is structurally guaranteed by reality itself. There will always be new patterns, new configurations of art, new scientific discoveries, and infinitely deeper nuances in human relationships to uncover. We can sustain eudaimonic happiness indefinitely by becoming attuned to this unfolding complexity rather than just repeating cheap hedone.
But here is the catch. To have the time, the energy, and the mental bandwidth to deeply appreciate the symphony of existence, you can't be worried about a literal tiger eating you, or a virus killing your family, or a drought starving your community.
No, you can't.
And that defines the ultimate practical goal of civilization in Neutkens' framework, constructing open-ended structural safety.
This is where the reliability of the universe's foundational rule becomes our greatest, most powerful asset. Because the underlying physics of the hypergraph are reliable and causal, threats to our existence, whether it's an asteroid, a global pandemic, or a failing climate, are not magical, malevolent forces.
They are not the wrath of angry gods.
They are just complex patterns in the causal graph.
And because they are just causal patterns, they can be understood, predicted, and eventually averted entirely through the application of technology and human cooperation.
Neutkens uses the historical eradication of smallpox and polio as the ultimate proof of concept for this cathedral.
Such a powerful example.
It really is. For millennia, smallpox was a horrifying, seemingly inevitable causal pathway that generated unimaginable suffering and death across the globe. It felt like a permanent part of the human condition.
But through laboratories, rigorous science, vaccines, and unprecedented global cooperation, humanity didn't just treat the suffering of smallpox. We closed that specific causal pathway permanently. We removed it from the horizon of human experience entirely.
We literally reached into the code of reality and rewrote the local hypergraph to exclude the smallpox pattern. We engineered a piece of heaven by removing a vector of hell.
But this immense technological power raises a profound philosophical question about the nature of our actions in a universe driven by a single foundational rule.
This raises an important question, yes. If the rule determines everything from the Big Bang onward, cascading through time, what happens to human freedom? Are we just complex dominoes falling over in a predetermined pattern?
Right, the classic determinism trap. If it is all just physics and hypergraphs, do my choices even matter? Am I really building a cathedral, or am I just watching my brain physically react to stimuli?
Neutkens argues it is a massive category error to confuse determinism with unfreedom.
Okay, explain that.
To explain this, think of a stone rolling down a hill. The stone's path is entirely determined by external forces, the gravity of the earth, the shape of the hill, the friction of the dirt. The stone does no processing. It has zero freedom.
But a human brain isn't a stone rolling down a hill.
Exactly. A human brain is a massive, astronomically hi-fi site of internal self-causation. Yes, the brain is entirely governed by the laws of physics. But the chain of causality runs through its own densely integrated internal structure. The brain models the outside world, weighs multiple possible futures based on its deeply held internal values, and generates an outcome. That internal processing, that sophisticated self-causation, is precisely what freedom actually is.
Freedom isn't magic. It is the capacity to process.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? If I can try to synthesize this, imagine we are characters in an incredibly complex video game. For millions of years of biological evolution, we were essentially NPCs.
Non-player characters.
Yeah. We were blindly running the basic survival scripts programmed into us by evolution. We were hungry, so our code made us run. We were scared, so our code made us fight. But freedom isn't about somehow magically breaking the laws of the video game's physics engine. Freedom is the realization that our neural architecture has become so dense, so integrated, and so complex that we have finally learned how to access the developer console. We are learning to write the code for the next level of the game ourselves.
That is a brilliant synthesis of the entire concept. And as we construct more structural safety, as we build flood defenses, cure diseases, stabilize our global societies, and lift people out of poverty, we absorb those crude external blows. We aren't just reacting blindly to hunger and fear anymore. Our space for genuine internal conscious choice expands dramatically.
But with that expanding cosmic freedom comes an absolutely crushing, almost terrifying level of moral responsibility.
It absolutely does. As our technology gives us planetary and eventually cosmic, think about the causal power of artificial general intelligence, or planetary geoengineering, or synthetic biology. Our actions have immense cascading causal consequences across the hypergraph.
We cannot responsibly rewrite the code of the world without deeply, rigorously understanding how it affects the complex, conscious, hi-fi systems that have to live inside it. Science and technology are not separate from morality in this cathedral. They are the very tools of moral progress. The scientific path of understanding the universe is the spiritual goal of building heaven.
Which brings us beautifully to the final image you shared with us today, a brilliant sunlit photograph of the Parthenon in Athens.
Oh, yeah. Massive, ancient columns of warm stone standing proud against a clear blue sky built on a solid, immovable foundation of rock.
It is the perfect visual summation of Neutkens' Cathedral. Heaven, in this rigorous secular scientific framework, is not a magical destination we are passively transported to after we die. It is a structure we are actively, painstakingly, and continuously building right here in this reality using the raw materials of physics and consciousness.
It is the endless stacking of harmonious experience. It is the deliberate cultivation of higher and higher, fight and deeper understanding of the cosmos. Richer and more complex art, more profound and empathetic love, without ever hitting a ceiling.
Because that infinite ceiling is mathematically guaranteed by a universe that started from a minimal origin, relies on a dependable rule, and will never, ever stop generating novelty.
Wow, what an incredible journey this has been today. We started with the illogical magic of the void before the Big Bang. We climbed through the explosive, mind-shattering math of the fast-growing hierarchy and the Busy Beaver function.
We saw how a cold mathematical hypergraph ignites into the integrated feeling spark of our own consciousness.
We waded through the psychological traps of our own evolutionary habituation, stared down the dark shadow of Viktor Frankl's observations, and finally arrived at a concrete blueprint for a heaven built entirely by human hands, science, and cooperation.
It is a philosophical framework that demands a tremendous amount of intellectual and moral labor from us, but it offers an incredibly robust, deeply hopeful vision of what the human future can be if we take full responsibility for our own causal power.
And as we wrap up this massive deep dive, we want to leave you, our listener, with a final lingering thought to carry with you. We talked a lot today about the danger of boredom and the trap of habituating to a life that might be comfortable but isn't truly authentic or eudaimonic.
Right.
The next time you find yourself feeling deeply bored or numb or restless in the middle of your daily routine, maybe you are staring blankly at a spreadsheet or sitting in endless traffic or mindlessly scrolling on your phone looking for a hit of cheap heat on. What if you reframe that entire feeling? What if that boredom isn't a flaw in your psychology?
What if it's something else entirely?
What if that restless, agitated feeling is actually your internal, your highly integrated, cosmically rare spark of consciousness, straining against the bars of a routine cage you built for it? What if that numbness is actually a demand from the deepest physics of your own brain, urging you to reach out, break the repetition, and deliberately construct the next layer of your own infinite complexity?
That's a powerful thought to end on.
Thank you for bringing us this incredible stack of material and for joining us on this journey. Keep questioning the ordinary, keep looking for the blueprint, and we will see you out there building the cathedral.